The harsh winds of the north battered stone walls, and the long winter nights brought months of darkness. Born into this unforgiving land, Ragnar Lothbrok was an ordinary farmer. Yet in his mind were dreams far greater than the borders of his village. Even as he worked the soil, his eyes were fixed on the horizon, his thoughts drifting to distant seas. The stories told by fishermen at the harbor opened the door to worlds unknown in his imagination. Most saw these as foolish dreams, but Ragnar believed they were part of his destiny. His wife, Lagertha, stood by his side in both life and battle. As beautiful as she was brave, she could don her shield and fight shoulder to shoulder with Ragnar. Ragnar's true dream was to sail west. No Viking had ever dared that course. Storms, unknown currents, and sea monsters from legend made the journey deadly. But for Ragnar, danger was not merely an obstacle. It was an opportunity to forge legend. This journey would require more than courage: a strong ship, a loyal crew, and a determined leader. Ragnar would have all three. The villagers mocked his ideas as madness, but Ragnar knew that mockery was often just fear wearing a mask. And that fear, for him, was an opportunity. He felt that this journey would change his fate and the future of his people. The story was just beginning. To reach the west, Ragnar first had to solve the problem of the ship. Traditional Viking vessels were swift in shallow rivers, but could not withstand the fury of the open ocean. This was when fate brought him to Floki, a shipbuilder known for his wild ideas and extraordinary craftsmanship. For him, shaping wood was an art. When Ragnar shared his vision, Floki's eyes lit up. This ship could change the destiny of the Vikings. After days and nights of work, they built a vessel that could travel both rivers and oceans, light yet strong. Ragnar gathered a crew of his most trusted warriors. They shared his hunger for discovery. On their first voyage, they reached the shores of England. The land's fertility and the people's unpreparedness astonished them. Upon their victorious return, no one in the village dared mock Ragnar's dream again. But this victory was the herald of much greater storms to come. The England raid turned Ragnar into a hero in the eyes of his people. But the village's leader, Earl Haraldsson, saw his rise as a threat. Tension between them grew steadily. Ragnar's newfound respect weakened Haraldsson's authority. In the end, the conflict was settled by a duel, a battle not just between two men, but between two visions of leadership. Ragnar's cunning and agility brought him victory. With Haraldsson's death, he became the new leader of the village. Leadership brought him power, but also heavy responsibilities. He was now responsible not only for his family, but for his entire people. This ascension was the brightest moment of Ragnar's rise. But the title would also bring him greater enemies. Ragnar was now not just a warrior, but a king who would change the course of fate. The throne brought Ragnar power, but not peace. Leadership also brought political intrigue and family tensions. His relationship with Lagertha began to crack under the weight of responsibility. Ragnar was planning new raids and seeking alliances with other tribes. His bond with his brother Rollo was weakening. Rollo both admired him and resented living in his shadow. Some friends drifted away due to conflicting interests. Loyalty became more valuable than ever. Ragnar's greatest blows sometimes came not from the battlefield, but from his own table. Cracks in family ties also affected political balances. Ragnar now understood. The most dangerous enemy was sometimes the one closest to you. Paris, one of the wealthiest, most well-defended cities in Europe at the time. Its towering walls, strong gates, and river defenses made it seem like an unbreakable fortress. But to Ragnar Lothbrok, no fortress was impossible. When Ragnar announced his plan to raid Paris, the Viking world was astonished. This was not just a quest for wealth, but a desire to carve his name into history. Preparations took months. Floki built new ships, warriors trained tirelessly, and supplies and weapons were stockpiled. Ragnar relied not only on his sword, but also on his cunning. Upon arrival, the walls along the Seine River stood tall before the Vikings. The Franks were strong, but Ragnar was craftier. Instead of a direct assault, he devised a clever ruse. He pretended to be ill, making the enemy drop their guard, then launched a sudden attack that broke through the defenses. The Vikings entered the city, seizing great riches. But the victory came at a high cost. Many Vikings died, and Ragnar himself battled illness and wounds. The siege of Paris carried Ragnar's fame across all of Europe. Yet this victory also marked the beginning of his physical and spiritual decline. The victory in Paris brought Ragnar fame, but his body was no longer as strong as before. Years of battles, wounds, and illness had taken their toll. His ties with his family were fraying. Lagertha had chosen her own path, and Rollo had forged other alliances. His sons were growing up and asserting their own claims to leadership. Ragnar's decisions were now being questioned. New leaders were emerging among his people. He felt a deep loneliness, which drove him to dangerous choices. Some raids were rushed, and some alliances were made with the wrong people. His enemies were quietly gaining strength, learning his weaknesses, and patiently waiting for the right moment. Ragnar's pride sometimes became his greatest weakness. He was losing his warrior spirit both physically and mentally, and this marked the beginning of a new chapter in his story, the fall. Ragnar decided to launch one final raid on England. But this was not to win. It was to die. His plan was simple but powerful. His death would unite his sons and ignite their thirst for vengeance. With only a small crew, he sailed to the lands of King Ecgbert of Wessex. In his meeting with Ecgbert, they spoke of old alliances and betrayals. Though Ecgbert admired him, he did not save him. Ragnar willingly allowed himself to be handed over to King Ella of Northumbria. Ella decided to make an example of Ragnar by casting him into a pit of snakes. In his final moments, Ragnar stood tall. Looking to the sky, he called out to his sons, "Take your revenge!" Even as the snakes coiled around him, he was fearless. His death created a legend greater than any victory he had achieved in life. Ragnar's death burned like fire in the hearts of his sons, Bjorn Ironside, Ivar the Boneless, Ubi, and Hvitserk. All swore to avenge their father. The lands of Scandinavia echoed with the sounds of their preparations. Armies were raised, ships readied. The great heathen army set sail for England. Ragnar's death had become the tolling bell of war. With Ivar's cunning, Bjorn's bravery, and the determination of their brothers, the lands of England trembled. Ragnar was not just a king, but an inspiration to be told for generations. His story became a symbol of courage, strategy, and sacrifice. And even centuries later, the name Ragnar Lothbrok was never forgotten.